Today we'll be taking a look at the American Standard Pintbrook Urinal, introduced in the mid-2010s. I think maybe either 2015 or 16, and still made to this very day. This urinal kind of feels like a worse version of the American Standard Decorum, which is basically an improved washbrook. Sure, this urinal is kind of better than the washbrook, but it has its own problems too. Let's see what they are. I'm going to be honest with y'all, I do not care for this design. It's just painfully generic. Yeah, it's modern looking, but it just looks so plain. This thing does come with a metal strainer, as you can see, but it does have a circular opening. It actually looks a lot larger than it might look, which is kind of surprising given modern washdown urinals. Let's have a look at a flush. Very plain, but very fast. Let's have a look at ball rinse. So it looks fine, right? It has abundance of ramjets towards the back. But I'm going to talk about some problems here. For one thing, it actually does take a while for the ramjets to kind of kick in. There are some gaps here or there. But there's an even bigger problem. Pay attention. You notice something wrong? Because I do. The water kind of forms into like a U shape into the opening of the trapway. But you notice all of this is missed. All of it is missed. So you would think it would be good ball rinse, right? It's not. It's just a very poor design choice. Now let's talk about functionality because it is very weird. It actually looks to be an improvement over the washbrook. In fact, it's kind of similar to the American Standard Decorum Urinal, where the trapway kind of functions kind of like a siphonic urinal, which is very weird. The water drains super quick, and it kind of gurgles a little bit sometimes. You can kind of hear it. I actually hold it down for a couple of seconds there, like 10 to 15, and it did not really rise up beyond this point right here, which is actually kind of cool. So that means that it actually drains a lot faster compared to most washdown urinals. That's a cool ideal. But here's my problem. This urinal is surprisingly very unhygienic, and it's because of the poor design of this bowl. Again, water just goes straight down to the opening. But it doesn't cover this area right here, meaning that stains and stuff will get left behind there. That is a very poor design, and there's no way for it to even reach this part right here, considering it's kind of a controlled flow down into the opening. That's the problem with this urinal. It's basically a worse decorum. And that's the American Standard Pintbrook Urinal, a very strange urinal for a washdown. It's very similar to the decorum, but it's basically a worse version of the decorum. It's definitely an improvement over the washbrook, don't get me wrong, but it has its own problems too, mostly with the poor design choices, because this urinal could become very unhygienic. But let's put this urinal into the grading scale. Let's grade it. Like with most modern urinals, the overall design of this urinal looks painfully generic and painfully plain. Yes, it looks modern, but there's nothing to really like here. I'm giving it a 4. As expected, the flush is nothing special. In fact, it even looks a little bit more boring on this urinal. Yeah, there's really not much to say here. It's getting a 4. Let's talk about this ball rinse, because honestly for a urinal this size, it's quite pitiful. Sure, the back room is covered pretty well, but for one thing, the ramjet quality is not the best. Sometimes the ramjets take a little bit to kick in. And then we got the other elephant in the room. No coverage on the front at all. Outside of a tiny bit of water, the coverage is so poor on the front it's not even funny. And really the design of this urinal is to blame. Not to mention the sides don't even get any coverage too sometimes. Like on the left side of this urinal, it barely gets a little bit of coverage, while on the right side, there's no coverage at all. They really should have thought this urinal out a little bit better, because the coverage honestly is really bad. I give it a 4. The functionality of this urinal outside the rinse problems is a little bit better than you might expect. This might be one of the fastest draining urinals I've ever seen. Even holding down the flushometer, this thing never really overflows. In a way, this urinal is kind of similar to the American Standard Decorum, where that urinal has some weirdly siphonic attributes despite it being a washdown. That's kind of what this urinal has too, for some reason. Again, I will have to dog it a little bit considering that the rinse coverage is so poor. You would constantly have to clean this urinal, which you really should be doing anyway, but now it's 3 times more considering that the coverage of the rinse is so poor. That being said, this thing is definitely a lot more durable compared to something like the modern American Standard Pintbrook Urinal, which is not really shocking honestly. It's like saying the sky is blue. We all knew that. The functionality is actually a little bit better than I was expecting, but it definitely could be a lot more. I give it a 6. Now let's talk about the overall value of this urinal and see if it's worth buying today. This urinal definitely has some potential, but it's just wasted. The main problem with this urinal is just the overall bad design of this urinal. The big problem is that there's just no coverage outside of the back rim. The rinse just does not exist in the front at all, and it's just because of the poor design choices. This urinal would be a little bit better if it was more innovative, like for some reason finding a stupid way to get front rim jets towards the front. It would look goofy, yes, but it would improve the rinse a lot. The main problem is that American Standard was just trying to make a urinal that just flushes on a bottle of water instead of actually caring about its overall design, which is kind of unfortunate. The Pintbrook definitely has some potential considering it's one of the more stronger durable urinals out there. Is it the best? No, but for a modern washdown urinal, it's definitely a lot more durable. But the big problem is, American Standard didn't really care. Therefore, a lot of mediocre qualities just dragged this urinal down a little bit more. Going into this urinal, I was expecting this to be another garbage washdown that sucks, but there ended up being potential that was wasted. I still wouldn't say it's good, but it's a little bit better. But that's not really saying that much. So, do I recommend this urinal? No. That's why I'm giving the value a 4. The final score of the American Standard Pintbrook Urinal is a 22 out of 50, which translates to a 44 out of 100. You know, there was a lot of wasted potential with this urinal, but instead, American Standard cared more about making this flush on a bottle of water than being more innovative. The big problem with this urinal is its overall design. It just doesn't work. It makes it one of the more unsanitary urinals out there, outside of waterless quote-unquote urinals, of course. You know, the sad thing is, this thing drains a lot more faster and it's a lot more durable compared to most modern washdowns. But unfortunately, it's not enough to save it from its poor design choices. What a shame.